Hello.
Welcome.
We'll just give it a couple of minutes for everyone to join. Excited about today's webinar.
Welcome, everyone. We're really excited to be here. And as you're joining, add where you are joining us from in your name. I'm Alexandra, and I'm in Richmond, Virginia. And we have Andrew with us, who's providing our tech support, and he is in Minnesota. Hi, Tricia from Flint, Michigan. And my co-host, Jennifer, who's in DeKalb, which is in Illinois. Illinois, rather. Well, can we see a few more people joining? Glad you're here with us.
Let us know where you're joining from if you would like to in the chat. We like this to be interactive.
Hi, Yashira from Eugene, Oregon. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Hi, Tammy from Pennsylvania. Hi, Yusril from Cook, Maryland. And Casey from Amarillo, Texas. Welcome, everyone. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Yusril. Hi, Sandra from Los Angeles. And hi, Yolanda from Chicago. Thank you so much for letting us know where you're joining us from. So all month long, we've been doing our diversity and equity and inclusion series. Today, we're going to talk about the disproportionate effects of the childcare crisis on children with disabilities. I am Alexandra James Okochi, and my co-host is Jennifer Johnson.
Hello.
So for those of you who are not our regulars, like I see a few on here, the format of our webinars changed a little bit this month. So we're going to spend this in the beginning of the webinar. We spend some time giving you some context. We want to make sure that you have some background about the subject, and we're all kind of grounded in what we'll be discussing. We'll have question prompts from our Be Strong Families Strength for the Journey. It's conversations for parents of children with disabilities. It's a parent cafe booster pack, and it's designed to find ways to bring unity and affirmation. The webinar will be live streamed to our YouTube channel, so please also go subscribe. And the recording will be available after the webinar has ended. So ways to engage, because this is a webinar format. When you're ready to speak, please raise your hand and we will unmute you, and you will then have to unmute yourself to be heard. Feel free to type your comments in the group chat and make sure it's going to everyone, not just hosts and panelists. And we ask that you be patient with us, especially sometimes when there's a lot of action in the chat, it comes really quick. So just be patient with us. We will get to your comment. And we encourage you to raise your hand, speak to us. That's always great. So we operate from some agreements to make sure that this experience is a safe space for everyone, and also that we have mutual shared learning. So we want to speak from our own experience. We want to use I statements. We're going to practice the golden rule. We're going to treat people the way we want to be treated. We ask that you bring your full presence. Please, no multitasking. And of course, if you need a minute, take a minute. If you agree, as you can see, that's happening already, please type I agree in the chat. Hi, Trisha. Hi, Maria. Hi, Betty. Yolanda, thank you all so much for agreeing. We also failed to mention, we do have Andrew, who is in the background providing tech support. He will be adding links to the things that we share within the chat. And sometimes, if he's so inclined, he does add on to the conversation, which is always great. Next slide, please. It's very rare, but it's lovely when you do. So we're going to get into the context.
Okay, yeah, so just to provide some background for our conversation in the later part of the webinar, Andrew's going to put the sources, the links in the chat if anyone's interested in finding out more, but starting off with understanding childcare needs of children with disabilities. Children with disabilities, they're an underserved group in need of high quality early education and childcare. 13 to 15% of children younger than 6 have special needs that may require services, but fewer than 6% of that group receive special education and related services. And diverse caregiver support is needed due to the varied types and severity of conditions. For example, mild to severe mental or physical disabilities requiring occasional or daily specialized attention, including the administration of medication, the use of specialized equipment, and structural accommodation and personal caregiver attention.
So a little more context, children with disabilities and special needs reap benefits from high quality childcare. They require services and supports matched to their particular needs in order to realize full development benefits, which these types of specialized and high quality settings can provide. Very interesting. This is also an equity issue on a lot of levels. Low-income families are estimated to be 50% more likely to have children with special needs than higher income families. Of course, this happens sometimes because of the greater exposure to environmental conditions, which may lead to disabilities, economic and social costs of raising children with special needs, which is the specialized equipment, the healthcare and transportation, which all can contribute to putting these families at an economic disadvantage. Very interesting, there's been a lot of studies around lead and particularly in under service communities and housing. So there's that environmental equity issue and environmental justice. Also, families of children with disabilities are disproportionately use informal childcare arrangements. So they use care for fewer hours a week than children without special needs and experience more childcare instability. One of the things in this particular article, I think this may be one of the ones that'll be in the link, they told some stories around how the disruption, and we all know this is, a parent of any child, there's a block of time where a lot of these childcare or specialized care facilities don't have the full day. So there's a disruption for working parents being able to have childcare that coincides with their full work day, which of course cause issues with their employment, which also kind of just is like this cyclical thing where it goes back to the economic disadvantages. And they said this happens more, it's rampant regardless of if you have a child, child care in general, we have a shortage, or an affordable, high quality child care. But if you have a child with special needs or disabilities, the interruptions to your employment is extremely high versus just if your child does not have a special need. So that's just one of the things I wanted to highlight about the article, again, which is, more of an equity issue.
It is a vicious cycle. Next
Next
slide,
slide,
please. And going off of that, talking a little bit about more about the availability and access to childcare for this population. I found this quite shocking, although I think I had read it before. Over 50% of people live in childcare deserts, which are areas where the number of children under the age of 5 far outstrips the number of available childcare slots. So that's again contributing to that vicious cycle. If you're home with your child, especially if they have a disability and you need extra help and you're not able to work, that's just contributing to that cycle. Many existing childcare slots are in programs that are inaccessible to children with disabilities. Slim budgets, low salaries, and low salaries disproportionately affect special education teachers, some of whom are paid below general education peers. And that kind of goes hand in hand with it most of the time being more expensive childcare for children with disabilities and families of children with disabilities. Poor oversight and enforcement of anti-discrimination laws intended to protect people with disabilities. With data from 2 nationally representative surveys, the 2016 Early Childhood Program Participation Survey and a combined sample of the 2016 to 2018 National Survey of Children's Health, as well as qualitative interviews conducted in 2019 from a diverse sample of patients across the nation. The analysis of this report demonstrates that families face significant obstacles to finding appropriate childcare arrangements. So that's just a bit of a summary of the unavailability, really, of quality childcare. Another thing that stood out to me, I believe it was in this article, was that there's really, when it is available, parents might not feel comfortable. It's one type of childcare, usually a group setting, a care facility, but parents that were asked or surveyed, they preferred more in-home or smaller groups, more specialized services where they could or had more access. And so not only is it unavailable because it is non-existent for some people, but even when it is, it's not necessarily what the parents would like to choose for their child.
You know, and I'm gonna share something that's kind of runs alongside this from the child care provider perspective. In my previous position before I joined Be Strong Families, I was the CEO of a family center, and we had a child development center. And we had a few kids with developmental needs, and if they were lucky enough to get funding to have the additional support and the staff to actually be alongside our staff, it was amazing. But a lot of times we saw that when that funding or something, may have happened with the funding and it cut, then we would lose the children who were participating. And it was actually a good thing because our development center was from ages 2 all the way through 12. And so it was actually really good to have everybody together, the lessons that they were learning, the social skills that everyone was learning. But we found that we couldn't get the support from, as far as funding, to be able to provide that specialized service. It always had to be either outsourced or it just was in general something that we couldn't afford because of the ratios. Even in that 2 to 5, you already have a slim ratio between teacher and child. And then when you add with a special, if someone has a special needs, a lot of times it's one-on-one. And as a child care provider trying to stay afloat, it becomes difficult. So that's more of a systemic fail situation, but it directly correlates also to families having access and having the resources in order to find adequate, and adequate is not even good, really the best word, high quality childcare. So next slide, please. So a little more context, compared with parents of non-disabled children, A larger portion of parents with disabled children experience at least difficulty finding care, right? 34% versus 25%. They face barriers such as lack of available spots, scheduling challenges. We talked about that a little bit. A lot of times these are half-day programs, and then concerns about the quality, which goes back to kind of what I was talking about from the other side as a provider, having the resources to be able to provide that specialized care. Interview parents reported patching together help from extended family, childcare centers, special education preschool, nurses, and home health aides, as well as significant changes to their jobs to provide care. Compared with parents of non-disabled children, parents of young children with disabilities are 3 times more likely to experience the job disruptions because of the problems. And then the consequence of not finding care extended far beyond job disruptions. Many parents who were interviewed said it was a greater financial strain, health challenges, and increased stress. The other thing I have noticed just in my career, before not that position, but most of my career I spent with Fairfax County government outside of Washington, D.C. They were one of, like at the time, 6 to 7 richest counties in the country. And they had one of the most awesome therapeutic recreation programs that provided before care, after care, which was like a great service to the parents. They also did a sliding scale based on income. But again, that also speaks to tax-based resources that that municipality is putting into this. Whereas in other cities, if they don't have the tax base, they can't provide the service, which would help decrease some of these issues. They would even, doing it with their therapeutic recreation department, also provide the one-on-ones. Also in a stint in college, worked for a specialized place here in Richmond, Virginia called St. Joseph's Villa. And sometimes there would be slots. They did a lot of grant funding to have people to have access. But again, it was always the question where you would see families sometimes rotate in and out, not because um, the nonprofit or the organization isn't providing the quality care, but it becomes an affordability issue. So there's just some structural issues there that I just wanted to also highlight. Maria says, based on my experience, the challenges have become more impactful due to the pandemic. That, Maria, that's a great, great, great point. Because I know I have friends who were in childcare facilities and they were either like significantly low or had to shut down. So now you have, you think about all of the parents who don't have children with special needs and were complaining about how hectic it was to, basically homeschool their children or support the online learning. So I can only imagine the intensity and difficulty because of a pandemic. That's a great point. Thank you, Maria.
Right, and it disproportionately affects, I'm sure, the more severe the need, like maybe lifting or safety issues, a multitude of things. So if you are we know that parenting can be isolating, especially in the pandemic. And so if you're isolated more, and then it starts to impact also your physical and mental health.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a great point, because if you don't have extended family, like we see on here, like, oh, sometimes some people don't have extended family. Maybe
Right.
they have friends, an extended network. So then where do you get that self-time to recharge your cup, which just is probably just made like compounded stress. So yeah.
Right. Next slide, please.
So we come to the fun part. We get to hear your voices. We get to learn from you. We're going to go into some of these questions. Just so you know, these questions that we are using are from our Strength for the Journey Conversations for Parents of Children with Disabilities Café Booster Pack. So these are part of our Parent Cafe model, and you can use these separately, or you can add them to a regular Parent Cafe that you are having for parents within your community. Andrew has put the link to our website where you can find, or you can just screenshot the QR code.
All right, so our first question is, who will take care of your children if you get sick? Personally, I usually take care of my children if I get sick. My husband and I trade off, but due to, not a lot of vacation time on his part either, if I get sick, I'll probably be taking care of the kids.
Yeah, that's it was just me. I just recently married, but before that I was divorced. And so my mother helped a lot. But when she was unable to, because there are other grandkids and other needs, you just push through when you're sick. You push through the best you can and kind of like multitask. So I would imagine, if one of my children had a developmental need, the pressure that would be, because, especially even now, like my daughters are older. So when they get sick, there's one home right now who wasn't feeling good today, but I could just set her up and walk away. You can't set up little kids, but I imagine there's no way you can set up. And but by setup, I mean like, okay, here's the medicine, do this, I'll be back in an hour, or I'll be back in 2 hours, depending on the level of care that happens regularly, it seems to me that it would be super intense. You,
Yeah.
you surreal. I really don't want to butcher your name. Um, Says there's been many times where I would take off. I would take off to my grandkids so my daughter could go to work. Great grandmother. I so miss my mother. She was like that too.
Yeah, and when I answered the question, I forgot, since my mom hasn't been here for a couple of weeks, but I also can rely on her to help with my kids if I get sick most of the time, which I know is something that a lot of people don't have. I have a neighbor who is far, far away from her family, who lives in another country and doesn't have that support. And I know that it takes a toll on her when she has to take off work to take care of her kid.
Yes. And so Maria said, my husband and also
So.
trade off. We will ask my mother-in-law. And sometimes, as I said, as Alexandra said, you have to push through sick and all. And Arcel, thank you, Mrs. Arcel. I have it now. I need that, sometimes you need that phonetic spelling. I definitely need it. So thank you, Arcel. Tamara says, as a single mom, I couldn't have done it without my mother's help. I don't know what I would have done the times I was hospitalized if my mom wasn't able to keep my children. She even took my kids to work with her if needed. Such a blessing.
Trisha says, now that I am remarried and my husband and I take turns, and before that, my grandmother did as much as she was able to before she passed away. My son has autism and other challenges, and I have never left him with a babysitter because of his needs.
I can only imagine. My mother has or my nephew who's older, like with my mom, just was always the babysitter. I always just didn't even want to put myself in a position to have to like get in trouble. And I just leave it at that because it's just so much. It's so scary, so.
Right. And getting childcare or having a babysitter, for example, it's not as easy as just having a babysitter. It's finding somebody you trust, but spending the time to get to know them, maybe not leaving them with them the first time. It can be costly. That might not be in your budget. And if you have a child with special needs, all of that is amplified. They need to have extra, possibly education, or at least understanding or experience, and therefore that childcare might cost more.
Definitely.
And you think it should cost more. It's more responsibility. And so even myself, I currently do not have children with disabilities, but just thinking about a babysitter, like I want to pay a babysitter more than I can afford to pay a babysitter. One, because I know it's a hard job, and two, because they're taking care of my children, which are like literally the most precious things to me. And so it's hard to put a price on that.
Definitely, definitely. And the other thing that, has my empathy just, raging and going off is thinking about, we think about as moms, particularly when I was, a quote unquote single mother, um, about that me time. Like I keep thinking about the well-being piece. And so if you have these fears or you have, I liken it to, I always had this theory that until my child was able to talk and communicate thoroughly and understand what's going on, I did not want to leave them that was not, with a total stranger, just because they're supposed to be a child care provider or anything like that. It was always through recommendations of people that I knew, for child care centers, et cetera. So I could only imagine that stress and that lack of being able, if you don't have a support network, to have that self-care time. Just, oh,
Yeah.
so, yep. Next
Next
question.
question, please. What are some difficult decisions you have had to make, such as where you live or work, that worked out better than you anticipated? That's a good one.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, Andrew
Anyone?
says you can also raise your hand if you would like to speak. I can answer a little bit. We recently made the difficult decision not to send our 5-year-old to kindergarten, which she was desperately looking forward to going. And, once you reach school age and you can go to school, it's kind of, for me at least, and my husband, we were like, yay, they can go somewhere. She'll be stimulated and like she's really excited to learn, and it doesn't cost $1 million. So just due to other circumstances, we decided that we're not ready to send her yet, and she's not quite ready to go. And so it's been hard because there was an expectation set. And she really wants to be with other kids, and we try to do that as much as possible. But also, we try to recognize that getting to spend more time with her, like when we're on breaks from work, and just having more time together as a family is a really positive thing. And so it was a difficult decision, and it's working out just fine.
Yeah, for me, I think one of the places that worked out was when I was talking about the previous position where I was a CEO of a social enterprise nonprofit, and one of our economic engines was the Childcare Development Center, and having the ability to have my daughters there while I was working turned out to be an extreme blessing. Now, of course, I had to do some training around. Like every time you see him in the hall, you can't be like, "Mommy," I have to be Miss, James. You're not gonna get any special attention, and that was hard for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, but it worked out. So Maria says, working in a place that values family. Yes, yes. Trisha said, I took the leap of faith and took a grant-based job with more hour flexibility so that I could homeschool my sons through the COVID, and my oldest child's terrible immune system that also has autism. And my new bosses love me and I feel so appreciated, which is wonderful. And they understand my need to be here for my sons. Yeah, that's beautiful, Trish. Maria says, so things such as my children get sick, there's more empathy and flexibility with my work schedule. Definitely makes a difference. Definitely. One of the things that I value about Be Strong Families is the value of family. Some of our policies and practices include, not just sick time, but like well-being, family time. Our family time is not just oh, if you have something to, if your child is sick, it's also you want to attend something at your children's school, which sometimes can be difficult. So I really appreciate that that's in practice as a part of our benefits. Trish said, yes, my boss encourages us to take the day off when our kids are sick, and it's a shock after years of struggling with it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I can never imagine going back to work somewhere that didn't have that understanding, because children are such a central part, and families are the central part of society. And when that breaks down, everything else starts to break down. And families with children with special needs, it should be built in to policies at the organizational level, at the governmental level, that they have more resource available because they do have more need.
Yeah, definitely. And the ability to have a flexible work schedule, right?
Right.
Because studies have shown, like, when people have flexible work schedules and they're not boxed into, you must work between these hours. One, most people don't work out of an 8-hour day consistently, they say, for 6 hours. So that's just this, like, reality, right? Plus, you have times when you have multiple projects and you're juggling, etc. But when people have more flexibility with their jobs, they actually perform and produce more when they're given that flexibility. That's kind of like that. You see what, and these are how the tech companies, but bringing it down into our field. Thinking about, places like Apple, et cetera, where they have all of these outlets to just take a break and be, creative. Even I had opportunity to go to Casey Family Programs, their office in Seattle, and they had like a whole meditation quiet room where at any point, that you didn't necessarily have a meeting, you could just go in there and take a nap and just be. And you just see, when you have those type of spaces or type of policies, people will tend to, when you're in those crunch times, go all over the edge with you to work beyond what is called for, because they're reciprocated, the flexibility they've been given.
Maria says, so true. Yeah.
So I think we could go to the next slide, Andrew. So what are the benefits of typically developing children having relationships with children with disabilities? So off the bat, having watched this at the Trinity Village Center, Child Development Center, is the care, the empathy, the compassion, and especially with the especially with the 2 to 5 year olds, them wanting to help, like asking the teacher, can I help? Even though they're like, you can't help dispense the medicine, it's okay, right? But they want to help, they want to care, they want to be friends. Also, I've seen children, it's not technically considered, quote unquote, a disability, but it's a medical issue we had. It still bothers me. A young one of our students, I think she might have been around 4 or 5, had cancer, and she had to be out, and she was going through treatment. And the way that the kids rallied and support and sent videos and cards and made things was just, it was so beautiful, because that purity that that children have, and the ability to empathize at that level is beautiful. It's society that cuts that off the older they get. And so I think that, to me, is one of the disabilities. I think it also helps with the bias piece. Ourselves said, they learn so many social and emotional skills that they can use in all aspects of their lives. Maria said, yes, less bias and less exclusion. And you know what else? The kids are more like, hey, come on and play, not even thinking about the disability or finding, they make those inclusive adjustments for the kids to be included naturally. I've seen kids like rearrange the game that they're playing so the person can participate, and it comes just so naturally to them. So I think it's beautiful to watch. Adults can learn a lot from kids.
That is very true.
Any other benefits? Okay, yes, Trish says.
They make them want to try harder to reach their full potential and finding positive things that they like in the children who have disabilities. For example, my son is super sweet and is very kind, and his classmates used to love that about him.
Definitely.
Yeah, I really the less bias and the empathy, the kind of letting that flourish, because it are like Alexandra said, it already exists in that purity of children, and not cutting it off, because if especially during, and I think the pandemic again has exacerbated this, where we can't be around a lot of people, and so that cuts down kind of the exposure, the interaction with different groups. And so just as an example, I took my daughter to a library event recently, and there was a family, and one of their children had a disability, and I was thankful for that opportunity to bring my child to an inclusive event, so that she could see people of all types, people different from her, and know that the world is full of people different from her, and not just create this idea of everyone is like us, like we're in our house so much that for a child that's not exposed to different things, it's easy to grow and create just a structure in your mind of what people should be like, or should look like, or should act like, or should sound like. And it's a huge tool, a parenting tool, to be able to have typically developing children have relationships with children with disabilities, and both groups benefit.
Definitely. And one of the things I think the cities, there's an example here that was really nice to take my daughters to, is that there was a park created, and all of the rides were all of like the activities were inclusive. So you would see kids playing on the swings, and then they had another swing if the child was differently abled. And so everybody's playing, right? And it's almost a lesson that you don't even have to talk about. And it just so happened to be like one of the best playgrounds. Like my daughters would be like, can we go back to that playground? And so it was built, it being inclusive was built into the design. And I think if we can have more spaces like that in society where there's that human-centered design, it would be easier for typically developing kids to get these lessons organically without you even having to say anything.
Yes. Yeah, Maria says universal design, and our world would be a better place because these children would grow up to be empathetic, understanding, and inclusive adults. And Arcel says, I have 2 grandkids that are the same age, 7, and my grandson is autistic, and my granddaughter doesn't seem to notice his little quirks that he displays, and she is very patient with him. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing. Should we go to the next question?
Yeah.
When choosing a school or childcare placement, what factors do you consider? Where do we even start?
So I'll start, right? Having worked in college, like before care, after care, so it's kind of similar for childcare, right? So and then also having the opportunity to have the childcare development center in our family life center. There was a baseline already there, but I continued along with our chief program officer and the other staff and the child care director to design the child development center based on what we would want, right? Not based on how much money we can make, not based on how many kids we can stuff in there to get more money, but it was about what are the things. And so, of course, like building those multiple intelligences was always like a first, because most of the families that we served, and even myself at the time, I always loved the Montessori model, right? But I couldn't afford the Montessori model. And so having other alternatives and other childcare centers take pieces of the best practices and incorporate it into affordable places, I think is very important. Another thing that's really important to me that's akin to, you know, what our other question about typically developing children is if they have some type of multi-generational program. So we had this grandparents program. They weren't really grandparents, but we partnered with the senior community centers, and they would come and work with the kids, serve lunch, read to them. And there's studies out there, of course, that shows like how great that is, not only for the children, but also for the seniors. Um, and then, of course, the learning piece. Like, is education and my child having the ability to learn? And then the people that work there care, because the other inequity in this is, right, childcare workers are not paid enough money. So that was one of the things we tried to do. Like, let's try as much as we can to pay above what they're typically paid. It's like two steps from Walmart, where, you're working at Walmart, but you still have to have government aid because it's not enough money. You're considered the working poor. And that's a part of some of the issues with child care centers. So do they pay enough for someone to have a living wage? So because it can be a high attrition rate, which then increase, like, it's not stable for the kids who attend there. So those are some of the things that I like. And we have a hand, Maria. She also put on the universal design, safety, skill set, and atmosphere.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So I used to work at a child care facility, a Head Start program actually, and I was in the leadership group. I was the family engagement manager. And when you talked about being underpaid, it broke my heart inside that these women were, 'cause it was mostly women, were constantly being asked to assess and reassess and observe and use all these different curriculums for the kids, but the pay never increased, only the responsibility did. And then we would constantly lose the really quality staff that we have because they can go to the public school and make a lot more money for the same and maybe sometimes even less responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, come
So
on, this is our future, and yet we're not investing in it the way we really need to.
definitely, definitely. And people don't want to put that upfront cost for the universal childcare. But if
Trisha
we
says, sorry, go on.
No, I was just gonna say, but the return on investment is already, proven.
Right. Trisha says, whether or not they get my son, I had to move him to a different school for kindergarten because the school didn't want to deal with his meltdowns and claimed they had no space for him to calm down and no one to sit with him. But his other school had an autism support room with calming materials and a special teacher, and it made a world of difference. And he started feeling like he belonged instead of like he was a burden that they didn't want to deal with.
Yeah, I totally agree. Having again worked mainly, at the start of my career in the out of school time, I particularly worked with kids who had ADHD or an anxiety. And it was so interesting that when they were in, what they liked about our center, and this is when I was in Northern Virginia, what they liked about the center, and getting to the get you point, right? And at this time, I just was like the coordinator for the after schools. I was in my 20s. Um, because instead of them having to take the medication in the summertime, they would give us a break. And it was so interesting because we started to notice, because of the way we designed the programs and the types of activities, especially art, the kids behave. We didn't have the same behavior issues. So there was something wrong with the school design and not having that special attention like you're talking about, that we didn't have tricks that you're talking about. They didn't have to have the medicine. I mean, like, they diagnosed my brother, who I lost a couple of years ago in the 80s, with ADHD. And a lot of times when they're diagnosed, and just like when I work with kids with autism, they always have like always like very gifted in something, like extremely almost prodigy level gifted. You know, you got I'm sure parents and grandparents who are here understand what I'm talking about. And if you nurture those things, then on the other side, it'll happen. So like my mom was like, no, you're not giving him any medicine. When he's done, give him more work. And she actually had to fight, because of course it's the 80s. She had to fight for them to give him more work. And then he didn't, quote unquote, disrupt the class. But just wanting him to sit still like that and not have any accommodations is like insane. Or like when I worked one particular young man, like I figured out that after we had some battles and stuff, he was autistic, then I figured out he loved music. And like he knew all of these Stevie Wonder songs and all of these Motown songs and all of this stuff. And everybody considered him like, oh, when you work with him, you know, he's gonna bite you and he's gonna do this. And he got me like once. But then when I started a music piece, I would just whisper in his ear different rhythms, and then he would repeat them, and then he would calm down. And so then after that, I didn't have the same issues anymore. But it goes to Trish's point. Do you get it? Do you take the time to figure those things out? And that's just with kids in general. When you pull the things out that they like or that they're passionate about, it's easier, you know, to get them involved. You have less, you know, behavior issues. They're easy. You can just because of that special attention, you can say, hey, I need you to calm down. And it's instant. And it's not really rocket science. It's about, do you care about people? Like if that's the baseline. And so when I hired with people, I made them like do activities with the kids, or we would pretend to be disruptive because I want to see how you handle it. I can teach you how to do programs, but I can't teach you empathy. I can't teach you compassion, and I can't teach you to bring out the best, you know, in children. So
yeah, Trish says, yes, when I worked in Head Start, I offered each child in my class whatever they needed and made it work for them. One way of teaching doesn't work for all children. Yeah, it's like not putting everyone in the same box. There's not a one size fits all. And when we make those adjustments, it's better for everyone. And this is children, families, adults.
yeah,
Maria
definitely.
says, speak.
I know I got a little on my soapbox. I started my career in youth development, so I'm super passionate about it, you know, because it goes to the kids who are quote unquote the bad kids. You know, I always be the one like, send them to Miss Alex. Yeah. Because in a week or two, you know, I'm not going to have the same issues because you don't want to take the time to get them. You want to make them be like authoritarian, you know, instead of being authentic and showing respect.
Trisha says, I had a lot of kids in my classroom the other teachers didn't want, and they were my favorites. They needed what they needed.
Facts. It makes a difference. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, a lot of times, you know, we don't adjust programs to model off those type of relationships, you know, and make that the requirement more than, like I was saying, more than how much you know the curriculum or this, that, and the third. Where is your compassion? You know, where's your empathy, and where's your ability to be flexible and creative? You know, those are the things that can't be taught. Everything else can.
Yeah, and Trisha says they can blossom so much when we go the extra step and treat them as individuals.
Yes.
Yeah, right on. Treating people as
Seriously.
individuals is good for the group.
Right. And how much does that speak to just like this whole month, right? Like therein lies the whole problem with society and bias, treating people, you know, based on what you think you know about them versus treating them as individuals. Like Tris, that's the whole word for the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I mean, it really is.
Yep. I think we can go to the next questions. Oh, Trisha also says the other kids in my classroom even learned how to comfort the challenging children and like doing it. That is
Right?
awesome.
Modeling, because kids model what they see.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you overcome barriers that keep you from getting the help you need? For resilience and determination and not stopping. You know, I've had a lot of issues with my daughters facing sexism and racism in the public school system, and I just don't stop until I get what I feel my child deserves. Like, I'm just not going to stop. You're not going to just talk to my children any kind of way. You're not going to just treat them any way. You're not going to treat them because they're children, that that they don't have a voice and that they don't deserve to be treated and that they should just comply. And so I think, really understanding how to advocate for your children shows them how to advocate for themselves as they get older and dealing with, these structural issues that's in our society.
Right. I find it really key to connect with other parents that are going through the same thing, because it can be exhausting to don't quit, keep going. And it's like, you can get motivation from that too, and how important it is. But personally, sometimes it's like, whew, all right. So like, kind of those conversations, those social connections for me are key. And it looks like in the chat, Maria says, don't quit, connect with others. Yes, connect with others that can relate, be resourceful, stir up your resilience. Yeah, resilience and the connecting with others and connecting with those resources as well. I find those really interconnected. And Trisha says, yes, Maria, I also use advocacy and support groups and other families. And like Alexandra said, being determined and asking for help.
Jennifer, and the point about connecting with parents, I think is great too. Like, not just the venting, not just them filling you up, but I have learned from parents, not just my mom, parents and us, right? But also like my friends whose kids are older. You get like tips and tricks, for how to navigate things that you won't get, right? Because, where's the parenting handbook? There's thousands of books when you having a baby, thousands of books from 1 to 2, but it's different when you get real lived experience advice from parents.
Right, and that must be amplified when you're parenting a child that is not typically developing, because the more kind of off the beaten path you get, the less resources or the harder they are to find. So it's also finding those connections with the resources.
Like in that background, one of the things that, the childcare deserts are totally related to that, just from, a racial equity perspective, and then also not enforcing the policies for people, and children and families who have children with disabilities, that the policy is there, right? My grandma used to say it's many a slip between the cup and the lip, right? So like, we put these policies in place, but the implementation of them, so that really hit me just thinking about the bias and structural racism that I've had to face, that, okay, the policy is here, but no one's enforcing it. Like, people aren't real people. It's just, we check the box.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the next question. Wow, this time went by so fast. It's 1:52, Jennifer.
Crazy. What have you learned from your child's experience? I love that question. Seeing things through their eyes, or kind of taking a step back, it's always like an eye opener. And, in relativity, the amount of like adulthood or the time since your childhood, it's short in the grand scheme of things, but so quickly you can lose so many of those things that came easily in childhood. So for me, parenting and seeing my child and what my child has to say, or what she feels about certain things, really helps me as a parent, and connect with parents that are in different situations to me.
I think the greatest thing that I've learned from my twins, who are now 15, they're girls, and I consider myself, right, like, I'm open, and I'm, try to see the humanity in everyone, and et cetera, et cetera. But I have learned to be even more open. I'm very fascinated by this Gen Z generation. I'm really waiting to see, because they are just so much more naturally open and accepting and give unconditional love. And so I think I have learned to increase those characteristics in myself, with my children.
Yes, and Trisha says how important it is to advocate for your children and other children, right? Because like Alexandra was saying too, the policies might be there, but are they in place? Are they being checked on? So, yep, we got to do it. If somebody's got to do it.
Definitely, I agree.
And like also being that advocate, I feel like you get more involved in your community, you meet other parents, you can help, like Trisha says, not only your child, other children.
Yeah, definitely.
Love that. Excellent.
Any last people? So just put it in the chat. We'll go on and close out. This has been great. So Amplify, you see, Andrew just put the poll up. Please take the poll. And we want to amplify overcoming barriers. If you have your own hashtag amplify, you can put it in chat. You can also visit our social media pages and put your hashtag into.
Okay, and coming up next, tomorrow, we have our webinar in Spanish, el jueves 23 de septiembre. We have nuestro compromiso con la diversidad, la equidad y la inclusión con Sara Gonzalez. And on Friday, we have a Taste of Strength for the Journey Cafe, where we'll be using the booster pack, questions from the Strength for the Journey booster pack.
That was just so lovely. I struggle all the time with the Spanish. It was so beautiful how you just said it so lovely. I felt like we're just doing a great job making sure that you are on here. Beautiful. Anna Rodriguez says, thanks. Andrew's putting the link. Yolanda said, thank you. Also, please subscribe to our Be Strong Families on YouTube. You can take a QR code and subscribe. We have the English and the Spanish webinars. You can go back and view previous webinars. We would like you to share, get this content out, help us build our subscribers, because as we do that, we're able to reach more people and increase our social media footprint. Yesenia, thank you so much. Thank you, Maria. It was a great discussion. Really appreciate it. And last but not least, one more shameless plug. If you really enjoyed these questions today, they come from our Strength for the Journey, Conversations for Parents of Children with Disabilities Café Booster Pack. Please check our website, check out all of our Parent Cafe packs, as well as our other booster packs.
And our great trainings.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. We have lots of great trainings. Check those so we can help build this world that we want to see and that we want to live in.
Yeah, thank you all for being part of this conversation. It's so great to talk with people. You never know who you're going to talk to, and I personally got a lot from these conversations, so thank you.
I did too. Appreciate you all. Have a beautiful, beautiful day. And we hope to see you back here tomorrow for the Spanish webinars. And definitely to see you on Friday so you can get a taste of this particular cafe.